On Friday, the world observed the inauguration ceremony of Donald Trump as the U.S. president. His campaign was riddled with controversy, and some questioned the wisdom in some of his comments. Now his term begins in earnest, and to discuss this further, we're joined in studio by Chelsea Markowitz. She is a visiting researcher in South Africa in the Department of Economic Diplomacy program at South Africa Institute of International Affairs. Good to have you. Welcome to Money Live.
Thank you.
Good. All right, so you listened to the speech, and I think everybody's had their chance to sort of digest it and kind of figure out what it is that we can expect in the next few years. Let's take it from you. What did you make of it?
I think it was very consistent with the line that he's been preaching throughout the campaign. It was a very populist speech, I would say. It focused on the America First rhetoric, on the American worker, bringing jobs back to the American worker. I think that was really the central takeaway around the speech.
All right, so it's still, nothing's changed from his campaigning. It's still that same, let's make America great again, America, America, and we're not worried about anybody else, which is a bit of a worry for the rest of the world. And I mean, you know, how should people be feeling with different trade agreements in place already with America?
Well, I think there's definitely some concern around NAFTA, definitely the most so, which is the North American Free Trade Agreement with Canada and Mexico. Trump has already made calls to the prime ministers to start talks around renegotiating this agreement. Now, this is something that, of course, would probably take years. It's not even a bilateral agreement, it's multilateral, so it will be a difficult thing. But I think he really is looking towards trying to renegotiate these agreements. So some of the bigger countries, especially China as well, I think should be most concerned, because those are the ones that he's been focusing on throughout the campaign. And in terms of satisfying his domestic constituency, that's what they'll look for.
Yeah, I know that's like top of his agenda. I know that's one of those things that already everybody's talking about, the relations with Canada, Mexico, and everything that goes with that. But here in South Africa, obviously, you know, we haven't necessarily been mentioned much, and it's something that I suppose we should also be very concerned about, because we've got very cordial relationships with the US. But going forward, do you think it's going to change at all? How do you think he views us, and where do we stand in the bigger picture?
Well, as you said, he hasn't said much about the continent, about South Africa throughout the campaign, and I think that really does display his views. He really isn't focusing on it much at all. So I think, in a way, this could be a good thing. If you look at the countries we mentioned earlier, what could happen, the drastic effects. So I think the continent won't receive the same scrutiny. So, for example, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which is the main preferential trade agreement that is in place right now with a lot of countries on this continent. I think if he were to focus on it, he would say it was uneven since it's a preferential agreement, not bilateral. But I really don't think he is going to place that focus, because he really does, of course, need to pick his battles in terms of where he's going to go up and against Congress, against what's been traditionally done. So I don't think that this trade agreement is really something that he's going to pick, because it's not as detrimental to the U.S. in terms of threatening manufacturing. It's actually beneficial in terms of creating jobs. And also, the American public does not know about it. So I think that it will generally be safe. So I think then it's not as much of a bad thing that he won't be focusing on Africa. But I think it would then be difficult if we were looking towards negotiating a new agreement in the future.
I know that there's been, I mean, we've heard Trump say things. We've heard Trump say things about a lot of things. But, you know, he's had such harsh words about South Africa. And, I mean, I can just relay two tweets that he said. You know, the one was back in 2013. I really like Nelson Mandela, but South Africa is a crime-ridden mess that is just waiting to explode. Not a good situation for the people. And then in 2015, as I've long been saying, South Africa is a tool and is a total and very dangerous mess. Just watch the evening news. We're not talking about the weather. I mean, you know, these are clear stances and opinions on what he has on us. But, you know, this was then, and, you know, that was then, this is now. Do you think his views change much?
Well, I just want to reiterate, I guess, that I don't think the focus is going to be on South Africa, because he's really looking at, in terms of his foreign relations, mainly how can relations with different countries impact domestic U.S. policies, impact his main populist line of supporting workers. So with South Africa, there has less of an impact on America. So I really don't think he's going to act on anything with regards to South Africa. His policy is quite isolationist in terms of imposing views and norms on other countries. So although it is worrying what he said, I don't think that in practice it's going to have as negative of an effect as some people might worry.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to wait and see on that one as soon as more is said. Let's talk about issues that are here in the front, and we in fact are reporting it on in our news bulletins, and that being the relations with Israel and Palestine. Trump now promising to move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Why is it seen as problematic? I mean, give us an understanding.
Well, it's seen as problematic because that is disputed territory between the Palestinians and Israelis. So moving the embassy there would be definitely making a stand. And of course, it's a very delicate situation there. And Trump has said that he wants to further work towards, as all the past presidents have tried to do, on negotiating peace in that region. So that's definitely not going in the right direction. It's making a stance towards the very right-wing Israeli viewpoint if he does that. And it will certainly increase tensions in the region if he does.
And we've seen that he has requested a meeting with the Israeli president as soon as possible to obviously speak about relations going forward. Over the weekend, we haven't heard from Trump himself about these marches that took place around the country, and we saw millions taking to the streets. I mean, photographs that are going to go down in history about people, and particularly women and those that are from the smaller groups and those groups that feel that they're going to be oppressed during his term. Do you think that this means anything to him? I mean, having a look out at, estimates of about 2 million people taking to the streets of America?
Well, I think he did tweet about it, and he basically said that people voted for him fair and square, and essentially that if they had an issue, then they shouldn't have voted for him. I think that's essentially what he said. And it's anyone's guess the way that Trump is going to behave and whether these types of things make an impact. But I think he's still really focusing on the people who voted for him and what they want in terms of bringing back jobs. So I don't think this necessarily registers in the same way with him as it would with all of us watching. I mean, maybe it would signal to him, as I said before, in picking his battles, that some of the issues around women's health, around defunding Planned Parenthood, will be a more difficult battle to fight, given the turnouts.
Yeah, perhaps, because it was a big turnout. I mean, it's a big voice in solidarity. Just finally, on a closing note, I mean, what are you hoping for? I mean, when you look at this Trump presidency, and people are nervous, people are really not sure of what to expect. But from your side and your point of view, how are you feeling? Well,
it's really hard to say whether he's going to really diverge even from the American public, from his party, on some of the things that he said. And I'm essentially hoping that he tones down some of the more drastic statements. It doesn't try to push some of the more ridiculous things like banning Muslims, building this wall in Mexico. I mean, these things would really have no effect even towards helping the people that he wants to help. So I would just hope to see a more moderate Trump than we saw in the campaign. But it's anyone's guess whether this will be the case.
It is. It certainly doesn't look like a more moderate Trump coming in over this past weekend.
That's very true.
He's come out guns blazing and already attacking the media in some ways. So it certainly is going to be an interesting time. But look, thank you. Thanks for popping in during your visit here to South Africa, talking to us here on the program about the Trump presidency and perhaps some of the things that we are concerned about going forward. Chelsea Markowitz, she's economic diplomacy program, and she's visiting the South African Institute of International Affairs. All right, let's take a break. We'll see you straight after this. Do stay tuned.